Marcus woke up in his luxurious penthouse, the New York skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. He scrolled through his phone, reviewing his packed schedule for the day. The centerpiece was a crucial board meeting where he planned to present a groundbreaking project. He smirked, knowing the idea wasn't his, but he'd take full credit. Across town, Jane rushed to get ready for work. Her small apartment was cluttered with toys and unpaid bills. She glanced worriedly at her son, Tommy, who lay on the couch with a fever. "Mrs. Rodriguez will be here soon to watch you," she said, kissing his forehead. "I have to go to work, but I'll call to check on you." At the office, Jane nervously adjusted her jacket before entering Marcus's office. She carried a thick folder containing months of research and development. "Good morning, Mr. Steele," she said. "I have the final draft of the project ready for your review." Marcus barely looked up from his computer. "Let's see it then," he said dismissively. Jane began her presentation, her voice growing more confident as she explained the innovative concepts she developed. The project had the potential to revolutionize their industry and boost profits significantly. Marcus feigned interest, nodding at appropriate intervals. When Jane finished, he stood up abruptly. "That's all very interesting, Jane," he said coldly, "but I'm afraid we won't be needing your services anymore." Jane's face fell. "What? I don't understand." The project will be fine," Marcus interrupted. "But we can't afford to have any weak links in this company. You've been distracted lately, always rushing off to deal with your kid. We need people who are fully committed." Stunned, Jane tried to argue, but Marcus cut her off. "Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be sent to you." As Jane left the office, her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers who had heard the news. "Can't believe he did that," one read. "We're here for you," said another. Jane fought back tears as she walked to the elevator, her mind racing with worry about Tommy and their future. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation as shareholders took their seats. Marcus strode in confidently, his tailored suit impeccable and his smile broad. He nodded to key members, exchanging pleasantries before taking his place at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice resonating with authority, "I'm excited to present a groundbreaking project that will catapult our company to new heights." He gestured to the screen behind him, ready to launch into a presentation that he had claimed as his own. As Marcus spoke, detailing the innovative concepts that Jane had developed, something unusual caught the attention of the board members. The large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall behind Marcus began to emit a soft, strange glow. This mirror, a relic from the company's founder, had always been considered merely decorative. At first, the shareholders tried to focus on Marcus's words, but the intensifying light from the mirror became impossible to ignore. Marcus, caught up in his presentation, failed to notice the distraction until he saw the bewildered expressions on the faces before him. "Is everything all right?" he asked, turning to follow their gaze. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and suddenly, images began to form. The boardroom fell silent as scenes played out on the mirror's surface, clear as day. They showed Marcus in his office, accepting envelopes of cash from known competitors. Another scene depicted him falsifying financial reports, inflating profits and hiding losses. Marcus's face drained of color. He lunged for the mirror, trying to cover it with his jacket, but the images continued to project around the room. The shareholders watched in horror as years of corruption and fraud were laid bare before them. "This is some kind of trick?" Marcus shouted, his composure crumbling. "Don't believe what you're seeing." But the evidence was undeniable. The mirror showed Marcus stealing credit for his employees' work, including Jane's project. It revealed backroom deals and threats made to silence whistleblowers. The shareholders began to murmur among themselves, shock turning to anger. Marcus frantically tried to regain control of the situation, but his words fell on deaf ears. The truth of his actions was literally on display for all to see. Outside the boardroom, words spread quickly. Employees gathered, whispering and pointing. Among them was Jane, who'd been clearing out her desk. She watched the chaos unfold, a mix of vindication and disbelief washing over her. The boardroom erupted into chaos as the shareholders witnessed Marcus's corrupt actions unfold on the enchanted mirror. Gasps of shock and angry mutters filled the air. Marcus's carefully crafted facade of success crumbled before their eyes. "This is outrageous," shouted one of the senior board members, his face red with anger. "Marcus, explain yourself immediately." Marcus stumbled over his words, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, desperately trying to regain control. "These are clearly fabricated images. Someone's trying to sabotage me." But his protests fell on deaf ears as the mirror continued its relentless expose. It showed Marcus manipulating financial reports, inflating profits, and concealing massive losses. Another scene revealed him accepting bribes from competitors in exchange for insider information. The chief financial officer stood up, his voice trembling with rage. "The numbers. I always suspected something was off, but I never imagined it was this bad. You've been lying to us all along." As Marcus frantically tried to shut off the mirror, more damning evidence emerged. The shareholders watched in horror as he stole ideas from his employees, including Jane's innovative project, and claimed them as his own. Outside the boardroom, word spread like wildfire. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering and pointing towards a commotion. Jane, who had been packing her belongings, found herself surrounded by supportive colleagues. "Jane, you won't believe what's happening," her friend from accounting said, breathless with excitement. "Marcus is being exposed for all his lies and corruption. Everyone can see he stole your project." Jane felt a mix of emotions wash over her, anger at the injustice she'd suffered, hope that the truth was finally coming to light, and a hint of satisfaction at seeing Marcus's downfall. Her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers expressing their support. "We always knew you were the brains behind that project," one message read. Another stated, "You should be in that boardroom presenting your own work." As the chaos in the boardroom intensified, several board members began discussing Marcus's immediate removal. The head of human resources approached Jane, a determined look on his face. "Jane, we may need you to present your project to the board," he said. "Are you prepared to do that?" Jane took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, she felt a surge of confidence. This was her moment to reclaim her work and prove her worth. "Yes," she replied firmly. "I'm ready." Jane stood outside the boardroom, her heart pounding. She could hear the commotion inside as Marcus's fraudulent activities continued to be exposed. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Marcus, his face pale and sweating, glared at her from the head of the table. The enchanted mirror had ceased its revelations, but the damage was done. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jane began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I believe I can shed some light on the project Mr. Steele was about to present." The head of human resources nodded encouragingly. "Please, Jane, we'd like to hear from you." Jane moved to the front of the room, conscious of the tension in the air. She opened her laptop and connected it to the projector. This project, which Mr. Steele claimed as his own, was actually developed by me and my team over the past 6 months. She launched into her presentation, explaining the innovative concepts and potential market impact. As she spoke, her confidence grew. The shareholders leaned forward, their interest piqued by the depth of her knowledge and the clarity of her vision. "Our research indicates that this new approach could increase efficiency by 40% and potentially double our market share within 2 years, Jane explained, pointing to a graph on the screen. One of the board members interrupted. "This is impressive work, Jane. Why are we only hearing about this from you now?" Jane hesitated, glancing at Marcus, who sat slumped in his chair. "I presented this project to Mr. Steele yesterday. He terminated my employment shortly after." Murmurs of outrage rippled through the room. The CFO stood up, addressing Jane directly. "Can you walk us through the financial projections?" For the next hour, Jane fielded questions from the board, demonstrating her thorough understanding of every aspect of the project. The atmosphere in the room shifted from skepticism to enthusiasm as the potential of Jane's work became clear. As Jane concluded her presentation, the room erupted in applause. The board members exchanged impressed looks, nodding in approval. The chairman of the board stood up. "Thank you, Jane. Your work is exceptional. If you'll excuse us, the board needs to discuss some matters privately." Jane nodded, gathering her materials. As she left the room, she could feel the weight of Marcus's glare on her back. But for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Her hard work and integrity had finally been recognized. Outside, her colleagues waited anxiously. "How did it go?" they asked in unison. Jane allowed herself a small smile. "I think it went well. Now we wait." The boardroom door opened, and the chairman emerged, his face stern. "Mr. Steele, we need to speak with you privately," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus, his arrogance now replaced by barely concealed panic, followed the chairman back into the room. The door closed, leaving the employees in tense silence. Inside, the board members sat grim-faced around the table. The chairman spoke first. "Marcus, in light of the evidence we've seen and your blatant theft of intellectual property, we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. I built this company." "You've been manipulating and deceiving us for years," the CFO interjected. "We've already contacted our legal team. You'll be facing criminal charges for fraud." As Marcus sputtered and threatened, security guards entered the room. "Please escort Mr. Steele from the premises," the chairman ordered, "and ensure he doesn't take any company property with him." The guards approached Marcus, who shrugged them off angrily. "I'll go myself," he spat, storming towards the door. As Marcus was led out, the chairman turned to the head of HR. "Please ask Jane to come back in." Jane re-entered the boardroom, her nervousness evident but her posture determined. The chairman smiled at her, a stark contrast to his previous demeanor. "Jane, we owe you an apology," he began. "Your work is exceptional, and we've been blind to your contributions. We'd like to offer you a senior position as head of our new innovation department." Jane's eyes widened in surprise. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored. You'll have full credit for your project and the resources to implement it," the CFO added. "We believe your ideas could transform this company." As the details of her new role were discussed, Jane felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Her hard work and integrity had finally been recognized. Outside, word of the dramatic changes spread quickly. As Jane exited the boardroom, she was met with a spontaneous round of applause from her colleagues. People rushed to congratulate her, shaking her hand and patting her back. "You deserve this, Jane," her friend from accounting beamed. Meanwhile, Marcus was escorted through the office, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. Employees who had once cowered in his presence now watched openly as he was led to the elevator. As the doors closed on Marcus, symbolically ending his reign of corruption, Jane found herself surrounded by her team, all eager to hear about the future of their project under her leadership. For the first time in months, Jane smiled broadly. She had a lot of work ahead, but now she could do it on her own terms, with the respect and support she had earned. Marcus stumbled out of the elevator into the lobby, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. The security guards flanked him, their presence a clear message that his reign was over. Employees gathered in small groups, watching the spectacle with a mix of shock and satisfaction. As he was led towards the exit, Marcus tried one last desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. "This is all a misunderstanding," he shouted, his voice echoing in the now silent lobby. "I've done nothing but bring success to this company." His words fell on deaf ears. The employees who had suffered under his tyrannical leadership for years simply stared, some shaking their heads in disbelief at his audacity. Just as they reached the revolving doors, a man in a crisp suit approached, flanked by 2 police officers. "Marcus Steele?" the man asked, though it was clear he already knew the answer. Marcus's face drained of color. "Who's asking?" "I'm Agent Johnson from the Financial Crimes Unit," the man replied, flashing his badge. "We have some questions about certain discrepancies in your company's financial reports." Marcus's lawyer, hastily summoned, pushed through the gathering crowd. "My client has no comment at this time," he interjected, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. As the group moved outside, reporters who had gotten wind of the dramatic events inside swarmed around them, cameras flashing and questions flying. "Mr. Steele, is it true you've been fired for fraud? What do you have to say about the allegations of stealing employees' ideas? How do you respond to claims of financial mismanagement?" Marcus tried to push through the crowd, his face a mask of fury and fear. His lawyer attempted to shield him from the cameras, repeating, "No comment," like a mantra. As they reached Marcus's car, the CFO of the company approached, his face grim. "Marcus," he called out, causing the disgraced CEO to turn. "I thought you should know, all company accounts in your name have been frozen pending investigation." The color drained from Marcus's face as the full impact of his downfall hit him. He slumped into the back of his car, the door slamming shut on the chaos outside. From the lobby windows, employees watched as Marcus's car pulled away, trailed by police vehicles. The atmosphere inside was electric, a mix of shock at the rapid turn of events and relief that the truth had finally come to light. Upstairs, oblivious to the scene below, Jane continued her meeting with the board, mapping out the future of the company, a future that now looked brighter than ever. A week after the dramatic events that led to Marcus's downfall, Jane sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by her team. The atmosphere was charged with enthusiasm and purpose, a stark contrast to the tension that had permeated the office under Marcus's leadership. "All right, team," Jane began, her voice confident but warm. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Our project has been greenlit by the board, and they're giving us full support to implement it. But we're not just changing our product line, we're changing our company culture." She stood up and walked to the whiteboard, marker in hand. "Transparency and collaboration will be our new pillars. No more siloed departments or hidden agendas. I want everyone's input on how we can make this company a better place to work while we innovate." As Jane led the brainstorming session, ideas flowed freely. Employees who had once been afraid to speak up now eagerly shared their thoughts. They discussed open communication channels, regular town hall meetings, and a new system for recognizing and rewarding innovative ideas from all levels of the company. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat in his luxurious apartment, but the surroundings brought him no comfort. His phone, once constantly buzzing with messages from business contacts and sycophants, was eerily silent. He scrolled through his contact list, desperately seeking someone who might help him salvage his reputation. But as he called former colleagues and business partners, he was met with the same response: voicemail. Those who did pick up quickly made excuses to end the call. The news of his fraudulent activities had spread quickly through their industry, and no one wanted to be associated with him. Marcus turned on the TV, only to see his own face plastered across the business news channels. Former CEO Marcus Steele faces multiple charges of fraud and embezzlement, the headline read. He quickly switched it off, his hand shaking. Back at the office, Jane wrapped up the meeting with her team. "Great work, everyone. Let's start implementing these changes right away. Remember, our success is built on all of our contributions." As the team filed out, energized and motivated, Jane's assistant poked her head in. "Jane, the press is here for your interview about the company's new direction. Are you ready?" Jane took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and nodded. "Yes, I'm ready. It's time to show the world what this company can really do when we work together." As Jane walked towards the conference room where the reporters waited, she felt a sense of purpose and excitement. The challenges ahead were significant, but for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. 6 months had passed since Jane took the helm of the company. The transformation was remarkable. The office buzzed with energy as employees collaborated on projects, no longer afraid to share ideas or challenge the status quo. Jane stood at the podium during the company's quarterly meeting, addressing a room full of engaged employees and board members. "I'm proud to announce that our innovative project has exceeded all expectations," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Our market share has increased by 30%, and employee satisfaction is at an all-time high." Applause erupted from the audience. Jane continued, "But we're not stopping here. We've got 3 new projects in development, all stemming from ideas brought forward by our team members. This is what happens when we value every voice in our company." As Jane fielded questions from employees and shareholders alike, her assistant quietly approached the podium and whispered in her ear. Jane's expression remained neutral as she wrapped up the meeting. Back in her office, Jane turned to her assistant. "What's the update on Marcus?" Her assistant handed her a tablet with a news article displayed. "He's been called to testify in the criminal investigation. The prosecutors have built a strong case against him." Jane skimmed the article, which detailed extensive charges Marcus was facing: fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. The potential sentence, if convicted on all counts, could be up to 20 years in prison. Across town, Marcus sat in his lawyer's office, a shell of his former self. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "They can't do this to me," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I built that company. I made it what it is." His lawyer sighed, pushing a stack of papers across the desk. "Marcus, the evidence against you is overwhelming. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal. It's your best option at this point." Marcus stared at the documents, his hands shaking. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. His reputation was in tatters, his former contacts avoided him like the plague, and now he was facing the very real possibility of spending years behind bars. Back at the office, Jane received another visitor, a representative from a leading tech company. "Ms. Walker," he began, "we've been following your work closely. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership. Your innovative approach aligns perfectly with our vision for the future." As Jane began the discussion, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. From the brink of unemployment to leading a thriving company, her path had been challenging but ultimately rewarding. She had proven that integrity and innovation could indeed triumph over corruption and greed. As Jane wrapped up her meeting with a tech company representative, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a headhunter representing one of their biggest competitors. The subject line read, "Confidential Executive Opportunity." Jane skimmed the email, her eyebrows raising at the offer. The competing firm wanted her to lead a new division, promising substantial resources and creative freedom. The salary offer was nearly double what she currently made. She leaned back in her chair, conflicted. The offer was tempting, but she felt a strong loyalty to her team and the company she had helped rebuild. Before she could ponder further, her assistant knocked on the door. "Jane, you might want to see this," he said, handing her a tablet open to a breaking news page. The headline read, "Former CEO Marcus Steele indicted on multiple charges of fraud and embezzlement." The article detailed the charges brought against Marcus, including manipulating financial reports, accepting bribes, and stealing intellectual property. As Jane read, her phone rang. It was a reporter from a major business magazine. "Ms. Walker, we'd like your comment on Marcus Steele's indictment. Also, we're doing a feature on innovative leaders in the tech industry, and your name is at the top of our list. Would you be interested in an interview?" Jane scheduled the interview for the following week, then turned her attention back to her team. They were in the final stages of launching their newest project, and she wanted to ensure everything was perfect. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, watching the news of his indictment spread across every channel. His phone, once constantly ringing with calls from business associates and friends, remained silent. He picked it up, scrolling through his contacts, but found no one he could turn to. Everyone he once considered an ally had abandoned him, fearing association with his tarnished reputation. The next morning, Jane arrived at the office early to prepare for a press conference. As she walked through the building, employees greeted her warmly, a far cry from the tense atmosphere that had existed under Marcus's leadership. Standing at the podium, cameras flashing before her, Jane felt a surge of confidence. "Good morning," she began. "I'm here to address the recent news regarding our former CEO, but more importantly, to share our vision for the future. Our company has undergone a remarkable transformation, and I'm proud to say that it's due to the hard work and innovative spirit of every single employee." As Jane continued her speech, detailing the company's recent successes and future plans, she realized that she had found her true calling. The competing offer, while flattering, couldn't compare to the satisfaction of leading this company to new heights. The courtroom was packed as the judge prepared to deliver Marcus Steele's sentence. Jane sat in the back, having decided to witness the conclusion of this chapter in person. The atmosphere was tense, a stark contrast to the energetic buzz of her office. "Marcus Steele, please rise," the judge commanded. Marcus stood, his once immaculate suit now ill-fitting on his gaunt frame. "This court has found you guilty on all counts of fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. Your actions have caused immeasurable harm to countless individuals and shaken the very foundation of corporate trust." The judge paused, surveying the courtroom. "I hereby sentence you to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 10 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $50 million in restitution to the company and its shareholders." As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, Jane slipped out of the courtroom. She had seen enough. It was time to focus on the future. Back at her office, Jane found an envelope on her desk. Inside was an invitation to a prestigious award ceremony. She had been nominated for Business Leader of the Year for her role in transforming the company and promoting ethical leadership. As she prepared her acceptance speech a few weeks later, Jane reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought her here. From the brink of unemployment to leading a thriving company, her path had been challenging but ultimately rewarding. Standing on the stage, the award in her hands, Jane addressed the audience of industry leaders and innovators. "This award isn't just for me," she began. "It's for every employee who dared to speak up, every team member who contributed their ideas, and every person who believed that integrity and innovation could triumph over corruption." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "We've proven that success doesn't have to come at the cost of ethics. That true leadership isn't about power or personal gain, but about empowering others and driving positive change." As applause filled the room, Jane felt a sense of closure. The dark days of Marcus's reign were behind them. She had not only reclaimed her own career, but had also paved the way for a new era of ethical business leadership. Leaving the stage, Jane was approached by aspiring entrepreneurs and established CEOs alike, all eager to learn from her experience. She realized that her journey had become more than just a personal triumph. It was now a beacon of hope and a model for others to follow. As she headed home that night, Jane felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities, and she was ready to face whatever challenges it might bring.